Yeah means hi in Greek. I was supposed to say hi now. Any Greeks by any chance in Norwich apart from me right now? No?
It's literally just you.
No, I love Norwich. Anyone with a car that likes Greek people?
Did anyone come from Reading this evening?
No? Okay, I should take this chance anyway. So, as Mark said, this is who I am. I work at Semrush. You can find me on social, mainly on LinkedIn. I don't know, I'm probably not a real SEO because I'm not very active on Twitter, but I'm working on that. So I am going to get there soon. And the structure for today's talk is we're going to talk a bit about why content is so important in the context of growing organic visibility. Then what does content as a product mean? How I use that to grow Semrush, and what kind of framework we built there with a team to grow our organic visibility, and then results and key takeaways, and then Q&A, but I hope you ask me in advance. When you start hearing my voice trembling, that's your cue to ask me a question. So, first, why is content so important? And first of all, how many of you work on content, like create content yourselves or have teams that do that? Okay, good, that's a lot. And can you shout just some like your roles maybe, what you do? What happened to those hands? Were you lying?
I just gotta tell people what to do. How they do it well.
That's the best role in content. Okay, so content essentially we find is what can make or break your success online. You may have a spectacular plan. Most of the time, content has a role to play in that, bigger or smaller. And then you can use it to build your authority or to demonstrate your authority. Definitely to build more traffic to your website, to build engagement and amplify your reach. Of course, leads and revenue, content is closely tied into business impact and many more. And then if you succeed, you're like Kevin in that limo. So Kevin's gonna make some guest appearances before Christmas, as you would expect. Now, how important it is? Why are we talking about being successful? What does it mean? We did a study. We studied 4 million search engine result pages with backlinko, and we found that the result at the top, I don't know if you can see, we looked into click-through rates, gets 10 times more traffic than the result on position 10. I always ask this question with this slide. How many of you scroll past the top results, like 4, 5, 6? But be honest. I see a hesitant hand. Kinda. Jack? Okay, you don't count because we work in SEO. So. Anyone else, like when you're Googling stuff for your own personal information or something you want to do you go past the first results maybe?
First sort of 4 results normally sort of like paid, aren't they? So you'll skip past them.
And then organically, do you go to organic results? No, really? Okay. Okay. So imagine that, okay, that leads about, from one single keyword, you can get 10 times more traffic. But as we all know, or most of us know, content tends to rank for more keywords than just one. So in terms of traffic, pushing your content to the top means you can get 10, 30, even 50 times the traffic a result on position 10 gets. 10 used to be the bottom result on page 1. I don't think we can speak about page 1, page 2 anymore, but kind of like as a benchmark for page 1. So this is great, right? You want to be at the top and you're thinking, okay, I just have to make it there. How do we make it there? So that is the $1 million question. And for that, we're going to use what Google suggests, right? Google should be the ones to tell us what the right path is to get there. This is what Google says in order to be successful. Why are you laughing, Mark?
It's not very helpful, is it?
Okay, exactly. So Google says create people-first content to be successful rather than search engine-first content made to rank. Now, anyone see a problem with that kind of statement? Other than it is very humane. Like it says, okay, you write for people. You have an audience who's probably people, still, not robots. Don't write for us. But then you're thinking, I want to rank. You're where I want to be seen by people. I need to do well. And I even hear questions many times from marketers like, so if I optimize my content, will I get penalized? This is an actual question I got the other day. So thanks, Google. Like, that is not very helpful at all. So on top of that, doing content is not easy. Being a content marketer is not easy. We did a study, we surveyed, I think, over 1,500 people who work in content marketing, what their challenges are. Now, I'm almost confident some of you at the back cannot read it. Can you read that? No, damn. Okay. So some of the top challenges were attracting quality leads with our content, or creating more content faster, generating content ideas, getting ROI from our content, proving ROI to management, organizing our processes. So challenges around content are multi-layer and span across everything from applying it, from creating it, from launching it, from convincing internal or external stakeholders, clients, to proving its value. I would say probably also measuring it correctly. By the way, if you want a copy of this report, I'm thinking we should not be asking for your details and get leads for Semrush. So just tweet the team. I bribed the social media team. I did bribe them yesterday. And I said, if anyone posts a picture, tag you on social and say they're at Search North, just send them the report directly. So you can have the full report with all the challenges and the solution content marketers find. Now, this is how I see content marketing. Normally, I see it as a floor full of Legos and us not wearing any shoes and stepping on Legos all the time. So it can be very, very... Have you done it many times, Jack? Yeah. Yeah. So especially with us having kids, that has become a reality. I thought it was always exaggerating parents around how much it hurts. It is not. But because it's Christmas, it's Kevin's car. So there's just so much to take into account and so many traps. Like there's conflicting advice. There's very fuzzy guidance often. Then what you see on the SERPs doesn't match what you're told to do. You see others get rewarded by not doing the right thing, which hurts and pisses us off in SEO. And on top of that, it's like budgets, bosses asking for results, why the results are not there, whatever that may mean. So it's not easy. I'm sorry. You're in for a very depressing talk. I don't know. Jack started on a high, but it's not going to continue like that. So my solution was to actually look at content as a product. And if you think about it, there are some similarities between a product and content. First, you need to have a defined audience for content to work. You don't know your audience, you cannot build content that works well. And that means you understand their needs. There's a need to be met, like with a product entering a market. And finally, there's a value exchange there. So in some ways, building your content marketing program is like building a product. And what that means is all you need to do to get started is, how do you get started in product? Anyone here designing products? No? Okay. I love the idea of MVP. So I love the idea that you can build a product and launch it as soon as it's a minimum viable product. What does this mean for content? It means the minimum information required to launch and be successful. That is almost as useless as Google's guidance. And I know that. So we're going to work on that in a bit. But first, I wanted to say what content MVP is not, because I think we're treading on some dangerous path here by talking about MVP. So what content MVP is not, it's not AI content. And that means not that you cannot use generative AI to create content, but just launching content that is created by AI without any intervention from you, from specialists, or with very minimal intervention is not what I mean by content MVP. It is also not repeating what the top guys say. So it's not looking at who ranks at the top. We do this as SEOs. Let's all be honest and say we do this. We do check who ranks. But then having that idea that I'll write it a bit better. My bullet points is going to be better than theirs. That's not minimum viable product for content. Essentially, this is not minimum viable product. How many of you know what this is? Just so I don't repeat it for everyone. At the back, I'm going to take, you cannot see what this is, so I'm assuming, yes, okay, I got that. So this was, recently I think we had some really heated conversations online. We had the Verge articles, which made us all feel so fine. And then we had this heist, as this person called it. So essentially it was like stealing millions of traffic. It's one of those impressive cases you read about online. Steal my formula, steal my work frame. I did this and I stole all my competitors' traffic with AI, with a simple thing. It's going to take you 5 minutes. Don't believe that. It looks amazing, right? He stole millions of traffic from a competitor just with AI content. Not really. Like, it did look like it for a bit. Maybe the fact that he really talked about it online didn't help. And so there's some theory there going on, conspiracy theory. But even if it did or it didn't, this is the actual look and output of it, right? So by doing something like this, you can see results maybe. Eventually, it will catch up. Google will catch up. If you're into it for like whatever I can make in a couple of months or a month, that's fine. You need a heist. But everyone else with legitimate businesses in it for the long term, don't do a heist. Search is not a heist. On the contrary, now I'm a bit bragging. I'm sorry, but I needed like a relevant graph to show that it is continuous effort and hard work, right? This is a chart from Semrush. And this shows you how many years the website was there and how it was performing. And it shows you the difference in the visibility from January 2020, which is when I joined. Not that I'm implying it's already, but I'm going to leave that just to decipher. But before, when SEO and content were not strategically approached, you can see it wasn't a flat line, but in the context of how much it grew in the last 3 years, it looks like almost nothing. And then since SEO and content became a serious consideration, a priority, and have a strategy, these are the results that we see. Now, how did we get there? I'm going to talk to you using the example of what we did on my team. That's me. And I look reasonably not excited to be taking a picture to get a visa to visit St. Petersburg office in January 2020 when I started at Semrush. Please don't judge. I couldn't find a better picture of me at the time, which is very alarming. So yeah, I joined Semrush in January 2020 to be their first and only global content strategist. That meant I was going to manage a team of, how many would you expect if you hear Semrush? I think most of you understand it's a big company. How many editors do you think my team have? I'm going to give you that. It was an editor team. Just shout numbers. I just want to see all the time how. 10?
25.
25.
26.
It's not. Done for the mister in the corner. Yes. Yeah, people tend to think that because it's Semrush, it's all like, oh, it's like the New York Times. It's not. I had 2 editors. That was my team. 2 editors, of which one left 2 weeks later. Not because I joined, I have to add that as well. Had nothing to do with that. And there was at the time an SEO team that was only just starting to be built. There was no SEO team before at Semrush, which was 4 people that we were working very closely. At the time, we were not one team. We later became one team. And I was also promised some design resource from the design team, which meant different things in different weeks. Mark, if you keep track of time, let me know when I have like 10 minutes or so. Do I have 10 minutes still? 14 months before IPO. None of us knew it at the time. It justified afterwards the goals we were given. So my goal, I had one job. It sounds simple. To grow organic visibility through content. To add to that, Semrush has a quite decentralized structure, which means that you don't often know who to speak to, where they are, what their name is, what they do. Also means that you cannot necessarily intervene in many parts of the website because they're managed by a different team. So you have limitations that come up that takes a while to overcome, or maybe make you lose the will to overcome them, and you have to find other ways to make things work. I also found out I was pregnant at the time, so I was like, okay, I actually have 6 to 7 months to get things going. And oh yeah, there was a deadly disease out for all of us. So yeah, that little detail. So we needed to figure out a way to grow fast, sustainably, with very limited resources. Also at the time, our editors were spending their time editing guest posts, right? So there was no strategy, there was nothing in place, almost company-wide, I would say, processes or work frames or even know-how to a degree on how to establish an SEO and content marketing program to increase traffic. So Kevin, my soulmate here, that was me back then. So we started with a blog. 2 reasons. The main one was not really strategic. It was what I was talking about before. It was the place that we could actually publish whatever we wanted without asking for permissions and without having to do many things that I didn't want to do. And also, based on the type of content I could already see we needed to grow, it was suitable. It's not the best place to put evergreen content, but it's not a bad place either. People have come to expect this kind of content on blogs in our industry. And an example, a prime example of that is Ahrefs. Also, how many of you know Ahrefs? Cool, all right. So you have to know that they were, and they're still doing an amazing job with our content. And this graph demonstrates it, right? Back in 2017, 3 years before I joined, both blogs were doing relatively similar in search. And about 2 years before I joined, this graph is Ahrefs, by the way. I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to step in front of it. This is us. So you see, whatever we were doing was not working. Whatever Ahrefs was doing was working really well. So it made sense for us to start on the blog. Let me get some water. So we had 4 key elements in that plan. One, it was very obvious we needed keyword research. Number 2, it was very obvious that that keyword research needed to help us build a content strategy. We could no longer rely on whatever external authors submitted to us to publish to get where we were. For years, that did not lead us very far. Also, how many of you believe that that content was submitted for the actual value of it versus getting a link from Semrush? Yeah, trick question. That should be in the SEO quiz. Then templatization, which I Googled last night. It is a word. After I had put it in the presentation, I was like, did I make up a word? And no one said anything because they're so nice. So we had to rely a lot on templates. And templates is not just about the content. It was also around processes. It was about creating specific work frames and templates to get things done faster, but also consistently. And the last one was resource management. So, for example, we needed to onboard external writers, but I didn't want to just search for as many writers as possible or agencies. I wanted to find good writers who we would work with over time, because it was counterintuitive to try and test every time when we had such ambitious goals. And this is how we pivoted from keyword research to content planning. First, keyword research. So your typical exercise of finding relevant keywords and their monthly search volumes and other information about them. Then keyword strategy. How many of you do keyword strategy or have done it? Perfect. It is a term I don't hear in our industry a lot, or I think as much as we should be talking about it. But this is essentially when you get your whole list of everything, especially if an SEO person has gone crazy just to show I could find 3 million keywords that are relevant to us. And then you're like, no. Keyword strategy is when you select the keywords that make sense for you to keep or to prioritize. To then move on to content strategy, which felt really well. The keyword research and strategy we had was great. And at that point, you get to content plan, which is where your main topics that you identify in your strategy that you want to address become a real plan of articles you're going to write, when you're going to write them, who's the owner, the stakeholder, and some other details about it. So it's a very detailed plan that everyone can use as a roadmap. Now, when we got to the content plan, when I made the content plan, that was a problem because I identified 300 articles, spared nothing. And the question was, okay, so how do we prioritize 300 articles with our resource and our budget? But that number did not just came to me in my sleep. It almost did. But it was based on our goals. Our main goals was traffic, not so much revenue in that first year. So we wanted to grow our visibility. And that is what, based on the topics I had on hand, what I forecasted we needed to get close to those goals and hit them. How we did it. So first of all, for the traffic element, right, you have to look at keywords and topics that get a lot of search interest. So search volume is definitely something you want to look into. And then for the conversion, you want to make sure that the topics you prioritize are relevant to your product. There were many topics that had much wider and bigger interest, however, did not make it into that list of priorities because they were not so relevant to our offering. And then I looked at a couple of things. So one is whether we ranked in the top 20 for some of those terms, which shouts quick wins at us. How many use this technique in general to prioritize content? It's quite, yeah? Okay, good. Keep doing that. In my case, it wasn't helpful at all because we didn't rank. At least for most of those terms, we didn't rank. And so then I did the opposite. I did keyword gap analysis with our competitors. I kept Ahrefs here just for the consistency of the example. And I looked at which ones we didn't rank at all, but our competitors did. And the more competitors ranked for them, or the better they ranked, the more of a signal it was that we needed actually to prioritize that. Also, how do you produce quality content at scale? So this is my very mathematical formula at the time. Quality standards, you need your content to be good. You need it to be helpful. Even back in 2020, we needed it to be helpful, although Google was not calling it that. And it is a very competitive space, but nowadays, I'm not aware of many spaces that are not competitive online. We also needed to hit a specific cadence, like 300 articles. By the time we had the plan, I think it was almost April, so even less than 12 months. And we had 2 in-house editors, not as much budget as you would imagine. So whatever you imagine in budget is like the editors cut it down by 10, and time limitations. So how do we do that? I remember me being desperate. The cadence I had estimated was like we need to publish consistently around 25 articles per month to come close. And our editors, just for reference at the time, were able to publish between 15 and 20 purely by editing something that is submitted to them. So they don't have to brief it, they don't have necessarily standards to adhere to or any of that. So by that point, I thought, okay, maybe I should give up now or just cry. I'll be Kevin. But instead, the idea of content MVP was born. And what that is remember how content and product have similarities. So all we had to do is to understand, is to define what is the minimum content we can go live with and expect to see results. Also, that means it was content we knowingly put out, knowing that we would go back to a bit later on, allowing it some space to breathe, to show us what kind of results it can bring, and then choose strategically what we address. And if you think about it, an MVP has specific characteristics. So you have specific time frames, you have specific budgets. We did that. You also need to define a scope. So we needed to define that scope of what that content is, the functionality, the information, the design. And then we had to define KPIs, which we also did. We had specific goals to hit and how we were going to measure it. And then the roadmap. When do we want to set them live? When do we want to be reviewing to assess if it brings results or not? Now, there's 5 criteria that help us define content MVP. And this criteria can differ based on your business, the industry, but the idea behind is that you need to define that criteria. You need to define your MVP, and as long as you do, it's very clear for everyone involved if you have an MVP or not, and they know if they can publish or not. Number one. I feel almost like a criminal talking about keywords nowadays, but I will. So one was how well it was covering primary and secondary keywords. And that was not in the terms of obsession. Like our editors were not just scanning the content and saying, okay, one keyword here, okay, TF-IDF, keyword density, and other stuff like that that we hear even today, unfortunately. But it was more like the briefs included specific instructions around these are the relevant terms, primary, secondary keywords. So how well were we covering them in that content? Number two, seems very silly compared to everything else you'll see, but a table of contents for me was essential. Was essential because we were in for creating really long content in many cases because that's what the topic called for, not because you need long content to rank. And I thought that we need to start thinking about the user experience. So we need to build table of content. So our development team also helped here. And it was a sneaky way for me to ask our editors to instantly check what the table of content looks like by pulling through the subheadings. If it didn't look like it was right, then they automatically knew that that content was not ready to be published. And instead of spending so much time editing it, they had to return it to cover the basics. 3, Semrush tools and workflows. We were notoriously very bad at including our tool and solutions in the content. And the idea was that although we didn't want to push people to buy with this content, it was informational content, for example, and the topics were more awareness stage. However, showcasing that relevancy was paramount. So in specific guidelines around how to include tools, how to incorporate useful workflows to make that information applicable came into this stage, and we defined it very clearly. Number 4, minimum quality. Now I'm getting into Google's territory again. So minimum quality is very different for everyone. But where we started was like we assessed the quality. We were literally scoring, using our own tools as well, but also editors' experience. We were scoring the results in the top 5. And we were marking where they were missing stuff. So we ended up, based on some criteria we defined, saying, okay, the one ranking in the top for us is like an 8. That one is like a 9. 5, average for the top 5 for us is 6. And then for our own tool, SEO Writing Assistant, they come back as like 78, 80, whatever. So we thought that, okay, we need to hit this score on our own tool, and then we need to be scoring ours much better than the top 5. Any questions? My voice is trembling? No?
I have a question. You mentioned the content pricing system. In terms of when the content pricing system comes back to you with suggestions to simplify the text,
Yeah.
Sometimes I find simplifications don't work for whatever.
Don't say that.
But in terms of the identifying what needs work, great. And I just would wonder in terms of your own experience, would you tend to trust the suggested simplifications, or would your editors sort of think, right, okay, it's identified this, we need to work on this later next?
No, you're right. So our approach was like you say, we would tend to look at it. It was only one of the criteria, remember, right? It was in content and in SEO, the more you can quantify, the more safe you feel in your assessment. So by looking at top results, I may think, okay, all of them are just a 5. And my editors could think, no, that's a great piece of content. So that doesn't help you clearly define some things. So things like Grammarly, for example, we also use. Things like our SEO Writing Assistant. But those were all just indications feeding into it and then leading us to say, okay, we need to do better than that. We were not obsessing. Like if top 5 had, like, say, SEO Writing Assistant, they had 80. and ours had 81. Were we like, good, we're done? No, because if we still saw things we needed to improve, we would do it. But it was just one more thing that was adding to that assessment. And I think with any tool, that element of human assessment and review is still very necessary. Like, it's not just take it in as it says. Thank you for the question. But remember, the quality is more than just a score. It was also like how much in depth or breadth they were covering that topic, which led us to this. And for me, this is the most crucial element of an MVP and of any product, right? Is what do you bring to the market? What do you bring to it? That makes a difference. That is going to help you achieve your goals. And this is the added value. Now, in SEO, many times when we're creating content that we also want to rank, we're thinking, okay, I'm going to add an image. My content is better than the top 3 because it has an image. It has more bullet points. So at that point, I felt that we needed to define value and what substantial values or acceptable value. And typically, it would be like mainly one of 3 things at that point. It would be either bringing experts in to give us commentary for the content, or author the content if they wanted and they could do it. It would be, if based on our analysis, the rest of the content in the SERPs was not so comprehensive for how we saw the topic we needed to cover, it was adding more information, covering more subtopics, or it could be using visuals or videos. Videos, not so much at that point, we didn't have the time, but visuals, so using the design resource we were given to make information more digestible, right? And of course, things like content formatting, of course, make a lot of sense. So, results and key takeaways from this. We had 3 key stages. Like with all content creation, you have 3 distinct phases, so briefing, writing, and editing. And I have to say that the briefing stage was the most painful, first because I had to do it. I could not assign it. Second, because that's where the majority of the effort went. If you see briefs, I have an example a bit later. Most of the time, they were longer than the actual content. They had tons of information about search. It had search insights section. It had a lot of things that needed to be covered. And at that point, it was when I was also defining what the added value needs to be. Because if we needed to source images, we needed more time, we needed design time. So that's the point, to define exactly what that MVP looks like. And then in writing, it was giving very specific directions about tone of voice, how we write, no fluff. What does no fluff mean? How do we write about workflows, right? So that templatizing exercise that we spoke about is where that was coming to fruition. And last, with editing, the editors just were responsible for applying ruthlessly all those guidelines and everything that was discussed before, and assessing the end result as, is it MVP, is it good to go live or not? It's not about just saying, okay, we did it because we have to publish, but it is it actually going to work? This is part of a brief. This is not just the full brief. I just could not fit it in one screen. So you have lists of keywords, and those were always defined as, apart from the primary one, which is only 1, then the rest of them were used either to create that very detailed structure. So the writers were given very detailed structures for what that content needs to look like, what the subheadings need to be, FAQs. I think, Mark, was it around 2020 that also asked was born as well? Because I think I'm one of the earliest adopters. I had found also asked, I was crazy about, I was using it for my research all the time, including like our own keyword research tools, so semantically related things. And those were given to the writers, and we were expecting them to inform how they approach the content, not to just drop them in there and make sure they are included. Plus many more, like interlinking, like where to link to internally, where to link to external. We didn't have many things to link to internally, by the way, but over time it became a bit better. After 12 months, we published I'm saying this and I still feel bad, like, we published 291 pieces within the first 12 months. And that just did not just happen because of MVP, but the idea of MVP plus some more decisions helped us shift our focus to the things that mattered. So for example, you remember our editors were spending time editing guest posting, right? They were still doing that, by the way. 291 does not include the guest post that year, but it became very apparent very quickly that that cannot continue. So instead of that, we closed the blog to guest posting, and we focused on bringing MVP to life, is spending our time to find great experts to work with us if they can, get them interviewed, or creating visuals that break down very complex topics into more digestible visuals. And that's our visibility at the end of 2020. It was plus 600% year over year in December 2020, which feels okay. And to put it into context, this is where we ended that year compared to Ahrefs. So remember where we started? That gap was just becoming wider and wider in the previous years, and it took us less than 12 months in reality to close that gap entirely with one of our main competitors. This is the graph I'm really very fond of because it is how content really works, MVP or not. Content and growth with content compounds over time, right? These are cohorts. I'm going to step into the light a bit. Jack, I don't want to ruin your photo. I was like, this is the cohort, the content published before 2020. Bearing in mind, that was over 1,500 articles. So in context, we published 290. That's a very tiny fragment of how much content we actually had live. This is how much traffic those brought back then and even today. This is the content we created in 2020. And you can see how much it grows, especially moving into 2021, and how much it grew since then. This is 2021 content, still growing, and 2022 is this one. I didn't include more because I left in 2022, so I don't care. But no, I left the team, that's all of you. But in reality, you see that this is not just creating that content and leaving it there, by the way, right? So this is what it brought, and this is in 2021. We started our auditing. We started going back to that content and making it better based on what we could see. So we applied our learnings, and these are results that I'm not sure I'm technically allowed to show, but I'm going ahead. So 2020, we managed to grow our traffic 55% year over year, which was above target. And in terms of payments, we didn't do so well. It was like plus 12%, but we were not focusing on that. Like our obsession was traffic. 2021, we managed to grow 110%. And actually payments, which then became one of our main goals as well, grew 50% year over year. So what did we do? We launched some game changers to do that as well. We continued with a content MVP idea to cover even more gaps that we had. We started, finally, our first full big content audit, which we could not do in 2020. We made a decision not to do it, although we had tons of content that was thin and not doing anything, because that would have blocked us from actually targeting what we needed to target. And then we started iterating on the content that made sense to iterate on. The thing I'm really proud of in 2021 is we launched our CRO program for the blog. So we started really experimenting and seeing what works, what doesn't work. How can we monetize this content better? And we gained that knowledge as well in-house because we didn't have it. And we also tried testing programmatic SEO content, which is these pages now in their probably hundreds of thousands, like the team are really building that now, but we first tested it back then, and we saw some good results. So key takeaways, please, please, please don't think content MVP is thin content. It's really valuable, targeted content. And the answer to content MVP is not, okay, I'll use AI now. Research and planning are key. To define a good product, you need that. You need to understand your audience. You need to understand their needs. Same goes for content MVP. You have to set very clear standards and guidelines. Otherwise, you cannot get everyone to be on board and do the right thing every time. So it's not working, it's malfunctioning. And then you need to account for iteration. You have to know in advance This is how much time I'm going to allow. This is the results I want to see to judge success or not, and have to iterate. And to preempt questions, number one, does it work in the area of helpful content? Because back then we didn't have that. We didn't have generative AI helping us all create content. Yes, it does. And it makes me think that if I had it back then, if I had generative AI, for example, briefing would not have almost killed me. So definitely helps, because we continue to apply it as well today. Maybe you have to redefine MVP, but the industry changes. It doesn't have just to do with Google. Competition changes as well. The standards vary. Does it only work for SaaS? No, it doesn't only work for SaaS. I realized afterwards that I was applying that kind of approach not so well, or so well defined and formulated, as far back as 2013, when I was working at agencies with clients in fintech, retail, small businesses, and it did work. It was an approach that, especially for small businesses and small budgets, it can work really well. And how many iterations? I'm sorry, that answer is it depends. I avoided it throughout all the slides, but the only thing you have to know is that you will need them, but then set your criteria so you know where you need it and in what format. And that's it. That's me done for today.